This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Check out Squarespace through the link in the description below. More on them in a bit. If you put all your Hot Wheels in a bag, close your eyes, and choose one at random, you're likely to find a car maker with whom this guy had some sort of rivalry or grudge. Today's protagonist was born with an unquenchable thirst for speed, an unbridled passion for winning, and the resolve to design and build the most powerful engines the world has ever seen. To achieve these dreams, it was only natural that he'd create a few enemies along the way. His motto was, think and act as a winner. That's how you will achieve your objective. His favorite car was the one I haven't designed yet. His name was Enzo Ferrari, a name that needs no further introduction. Enzo Anselmo Ferrari was born in Modena, northern Italy, on February 18th, 1898. Due to heavy snowfall, his parents had to wait 2 days before the birth could be recorded. Mom, Madorghisa, came from a wealthy family of landowners, while dad, Alfredo, had set up a mechanics workshop, employing 30 workers and providing metal parts to the national railways. Enzo was the youngest of 2 sons. With older brother Alfredo Jr., nicknamed Dino, he shared several passions. The earliest one was for sports journalism. At the tender age of 9, Enzo had one of his articles published by the largest national sports paper in Italy. Inter Milan defeats Modena 7-1. Next, Enzo wanted to become an opera singer. Every Saturday night, Dad would take Enzo and Dino to the theater. As Enzo fell in love with every other girl who could hit a high note, he figured the best chance for him to score with the ladies of the stage was to become a tenor. Enzo's third and most enduring passion was simply speed. Since a very young age, the Ferrari brothers could be seen whizzing around Modena on their roller skates and bicycles, but it was clear this was never enough. In 1908, Alfredo took the 2 boys to a motor race in nearby Bologna. It was a revelation, a new obsession that slowly started replacing all other interests. Enzo and Dino spent the following years building confidence on rickety motorcycles and practicing their autographs, already thinking about their successes. But then calendars turned to May 1915 when Italy joined the Entente in World War I. Dino was drafted into the army and sent to fight the Austro-Hungarians. He was exposed to many dangers, of course, but the one that proved most lethal did not carry rifles or bayonets. In 1916, an outbreak of the flu claimed the boy's life. If that wasn't enough, the same epidemic may have been the cause for Alfredo Sr.'s death during that same year. In the span of just a few months, Enzo had lost his beloved big brother and father. Moreover, the family business had collapsed, and the young Ferrari had to provide for his mother and himself. Enzo dropped out of school and found a job as an instructor at a school for metalworkers. But the experience didn't last long. He was soon over the age of 18, and it was time for him to be conscripted too. Enzo was assigned to the 3rd Regiment of Alpine Artillery. Thanks to his skill as a mechanic and metalworker, he was assigned the delicate task of maintaining and repairing sophisticated machinery used by the Alpine troops to carry artillery pieces up to mountain tops and over glaciers, i.e. mules and donkeys. So yes, Ferrari essentially spent his war years changing the shoes of horses, almost frozen to death on top of some mountain somewhere. Now remember that flu that had claimed Alfredo Sr. and Dino? Some believe it was an early round of what later became known as the Spanish flu. During the winter of 1918, Enzo was unlucky enough to fall sick early on during the pandemic. However, it may have been a blessing in disguise, as he was sent to a hospital far away from the front line. There, he fully recovered and was later honorably discharged before the war ended that November. Around the same period, Enzo moved to Turin seeking employment as a test driver and mechanic with Fiat. Enzo did not land the job, but was hired instead by a much smaller company, CMN. CMN stands for, well, whatever is put on the screen now. I'm not going to attempt that one. By early 1919, he was still a test driver, but later that year he was promoted to race driver and made his much-coveted debut in the world of professional car racing. The occasion was the uphill race from Parma to another location that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but it's this. Ferrari was at the wheel of a CMN Model 1520 running a 4-cylinder 2.3-litre engine. Enzo finished in a solid 4th position, not bad for a beginner, but he knew that he could do better. On the 23rd of November, the CMN team got him to race at the Targa Florio, one of the most prestigious motoring competitions in Italy. That, though, was a disaster. The fuel tank developed a serious problem, which lost Enzo more than 40 minutes. After a brief stint with Sottofroscini, Enzo was hired by the heavyweights of the time, Alfa Romeo. At the next Targa Florio in November 1920, Enzo was driving an Alfa 4060 with a roaring 6-litre engine, and that got him into 2nd position. This marked the beginning of a long and fruitful collaboration between the present and future masters of the racetracks. In 1921, Enzo scored another silver medal with Alfa Romeo, but also experienced his first accident. This happens at the Grand Prix of Brescia, where a herd of oxen had decided to take a walk across the track during the race. Enzo steered away on time, but his 4060 skidded off the road and crashed to a halt. Oxen aside, Ferrari met a few obstacles in his growth as a solidly famous, albeit not stellar, professional driver. In 1923, Enzo married his fiancée, Laura Guerrero. He had been attracted to her by her sense of humor, and she had initially been attracted to him thanks to his glamorous occupation as a jockey on wheels. But she soon started to resent Enzo's absolute dedication to motor racing. Laura was concerned about Enzo's own safety and tried to steer him towards more stable careers. But Enzo was too stubborn. He later joked that if Laura had had her way, he would have switched from driving cars to driving trams. Still, in 1923, Enzo scored another important victory in the city of Ravenna, not far from his hometown. On that occasion, he got to meet 2 of his VIP fans, Count Baracca and his wife Paolina. The Baraccas had lost a son during World War I, as had many others, including the Ferraris. Their son, Captain Francesco Baracca, was a certified flying ace, having downed 34 enemy planes during the conflict. Legend has it that after defeating in a dogfight a German hailing from Stuttgart, he adopted as an emblem for his fighter plane the heraldic animal of that city. And after that victory in Ravenna, Countess Paolina wanted to make a gift to Enzo. Why didn't he adopt the same animal, a symbol of speed and power, as a lucky charm? And Enzo agreed. Since that day, all his cars would be painted with the emblem, which later became almost synonymous with his name. And this is how the rearing black horse first became the symbol of a flying ace, and then made it to the logos of not one, but 2 legendary sports car manufacturers on both sides of the Alps, Ferrari and the Stuttgart-based Porsche. The rearing horse must have worked its charm, because in 1924, Enzo won yet another cup, the Coppa Acerbo, which brought him to the attention of Italy's Prime Minister, Benito Mussolini, who awarded Ferrari with a knighthood. During the same year, Enzo got to meet the big man himself. The Duce was visiting a senator in Modena, and Ferrari was given the honor of leading the motorcade of the Prime Minister. After the first stop, Ferrari was accosted by Mussolini's chauffeur with a request. Could he drive slower for the next leg of the trip? Apparently, Mussolini had insisted on driving himself in his official limo so that he might prove that he could keep up with the famous racer. He had managed to keep up with Ferrari, but it almost killed his passengers in the process. In July of 1925, Ferrari experienced for the first time the death of a friend at the wheel. This was Antonio Ascari, the star pilot of the Alfa Romeo team, who crashed his Alfa P2 while in the lead at the French Grand Prix. Ascari had been more than a friend. He was a role model who would later inspire many of Ferrari's business decisions. But the show had to go on, and the team needed a new driver. Enzo put forward the perfect candidate, Teseo Novellari, a promising motorcycle racer. The real experts among you will recognize the name of this legendary driver, whom Ferdinand Porsche described as the greatest driver of the past, present, and future. Teseo was Enzo's polar opposite, physically diminutive but absolutely reckless. He did not have any qualms in completely wrecking his cars in order to get a victory. Thanks to his talent, the Alfa team continued accumulating trophies, and so did Enzo. Over the following years, Ferrari won 2 more Grand Prix, this time on an Alfa Romeo 6C1500 SS. The biggest professional achievement of this period was the 1929 foundation of the Scuderia Ferrari, or the Ferrari Motor Stable. This would be the new official denomination of Alfa Romeo's racing team, managed both on and off the track by Enzo. Under his direction, the Scuderia participated in 22 races, winning 8 of them. Enzo's wife, Laura, may have disapproved of racing as a dangerous occupation, but she took a keen interest in the managerial aspect of leading a motor stable. She was frequently seen at the garages and training training tracks, sometimes providing valuable support to Enzo, sometimes overstepping the mark with her meddling. We'll see later how this would become a bit of a recurrent problem. 1929 also marked Enzo's first significant meeting with the lady who became his long-term mistress, Lena Lardi. A daughter of an acquaintance, Enzo had briefly met Lena when she was 14. Now Enzo was 31 and Lena was 19. He greeted the girl with the pickup line, "How did you get so beautiful in so little time?" Yes, this is kind of cringy, but apparently it worked. On August 9th, 1931, Tazio Nuvolari, the new star of the Ferrari team, won the Three Provinces Rally, a coveted cup. Ferrari finished a very close second. This event is significant, not only because it could have been another trophy in Enzo's cabinet, and not only because it marked the rise of Nuvolari, but because this was the last race ever for the racer from Modena. The tipping point was Laura's pregnancy. He wasn't going to risk his life and leave his unborn child without a father. Enzo's first child was born on January 19th, 1932. His name was Alfredo, aka Dino, in honor of Enzo's beloved brother. Just like his brother, though, Enzo's son would face an unlucky destiny. The little boy was born with a congenital disease, muscular dystrophy, which leads to a progressive weakening of the muscles and severe disability. Enzo would remain extremely close to his son, doing anything possible to find a cure for muscular dystrophy, or at least alleviating his suffering. Biographers have speculated that Enzo's constant worry at Dino's condition may have had a negative impact on his personality, making him more somber and a more short-tempered person than he was previously. During the 1930s, though, Enzo's headaches were still mainly of a professional nature. A rival shop had opened in town, the Maserati car shop and racing team. The Maserati brothers had first set up their workshop in Bologna, but in the early 1930s they had moved operations to Modena, just a short stone's throw from Scuderia Ferrari HQ. The Maserati were basically doing what Ferrari had been dreaming of doing but hadn't realized yet: building their cars and racing the same cars under their own name. After moving to Modena, the Maserati seemed set on humiliating Enzo, so they poached his star driver, Nuvolari. During most of 1934, Maserati dominated Scuderia Ferrari thanks to Nuvolari's victories on a C634. Nuvolari piled it on by having several bales of hay delivered to Ferrari, the joke being that Alfa Romeos ran on donkey power rather than the considerable horsepower of the Maseratis. Someone like Enzo Ferrari would not tolerate that level of trolling. Ferrari and his team of engineers set their minds on designing a new car that would put Nuvolari and Maserati in their place. And that was another legendary piece of engineering, the Alfa Romeo 158, or Alfetta. It wasn't long before the 158 bagged a position at the Siano Cup, and a first and second position at the Grand Prix of Milan, and a first, second, and third position at the Grand Prix of Tripoli. All this happened during the 1937 to 1938 period, years in which Alfa Romeo had decided to formally absorb Scuderia Ferrari within their ranks. On September 6, 1939, Enzo Ferrari quit Alfa Romeo for good, with a special clause in his severance package which said that he would refrain from using the word Ferrari in any mechanical, car manufacturing, or racing enterprise. And so he did, naming his newly founded company AAC, which stands for the name that I'm putting up on screen now because, well, yes. In 1940, AAC debuted with the Model 815, which looked like something Golden Age Bruce Wayne would fill with gadgets. The 815 participated in the Mille Miglia, a 1,000-mile-long road race with legendary status, but, well, the results were not impressive. Very soon, Ferrari would need to face challenges of another kind as Italy broke its non-belligerent status and fully entered World War II. Like many other mechanical firms, AAC would have to serve the war effort. Now, chances are that if you're starting a business, you're not having to serve any war effort, and that's great news. And you know what else is great news? Today's sponsor, Squarespace, and I want to tell you about them before we get into the rest of today's video. Two simple things. Now, maybe you've got an idea for some business or website that you want to start, and you've been thinking, I should get that out into the world. Well, the second thing is that the only way to figure out whether that business idea that you have is worth doing is to get it out into the world, and the best way to do that is with a website, and the best way to build a website, you guessed it, is with Squarespace. Squarespace allows you to create a powerful website for whatever you're up to. If you want to sell something online, yes, Squarespace do support store functionality, so you can easily go in, set it up, start selling stuff. Or maybe you're starting a podcast, they support that too. Or if you're starting a YouTube channel, well, obviously you have the channel on YouTube, but you'll want a website on the side, let people know what you're up to. It all starts on Squarespace with a beautiful template that you can customize to your heart's content, or start from scratch, or move over from an existing domain. Everything is super easy to manage with Squarespace. And once you're up and running, there's a super easy customization process, and then there's no updates, there's no patches like you might have to deal with elsewhere. There's just none of that stuff that you have to deal with. Squarespace also handle all of the website-y stuff, like I say, podcasts, yes, mailing lists, yes, social media integrations, of course. So Squarespace remove any excuses from pursuing your dreams. So just do it. Also 24/7 customer support. Of course, they're there whenever you've got a question. So go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Biographics, and you'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And let's get back to Ferrari. In 1943, Ferrari moved his plant from Modena to the smaller town of Maranello. Meanwhile, in Rome, the Grand Council of the Fascist Party had voted Mussolini out of power on the 25th of July. This was followed by the surprise declaration of an armistice on the 8th of September. As a consequence, northern Italy would be occupied by German and fascist forces, locked in a civil war with resistance fighters of many denominations, monarchists, Catholics, and communist partisans. The latter were known for exacting a sort of protection money on rich landowners and factory tycoons. And Ferrari was no exception, and he regularly paid his dues. The left-wing resistance brigades did not consider him in a good light, as he had gained a reputation as a supporter of the fascist regime. He had accepted that AAC would be converted into a plant to manufacture tank components and other spare parts for the war effort, and he was good friends with one Eduardo Weber, the king of carburetors, a staunch supporter of the fascist republic now installed in the north. The communist brigades had tolerated Ferrari for several months, but in October of 1944, a special tribunal had issued a death sentence. Before they could carry out the penalty, though, they needed a final judgment from the man who knew him best, one Giuseppe Zannarini. He was the partisan who'd collected protection money from Ferrari. When Zannarini went to meet Ferrari, he found him pale, tired, and solemn. He had just heard the news that Weber, the carburetor friend, had been executed by the partisans in Bologna. Enzo had a hunch that he was going to be next. In his later memoirs, Zannarini reported how Ferrari did not appear scared, only sad that he would not live long enough to fully realize the dream that he had been pursuing for years to build and develop his own cars. After a long, intense conversation, Zannarini settled on a compromise. If Ferrari could donate to the resistance 500,000 lira, that's about $600,000 in today's money, they would let him live. Enzo asked for 12 days to find the money, and Zannarini agreed. Later, the partisan reported back to his superiors that Ferrari could be more useful to their cause if he stayed alive. And indeed, he would be useful. After paying his ticket for survival, Ferrari proceeded to actively collaborate with the resistance, using his factory to hide stashes of weapons and ammo, which would then be forwarded to the partisans. He was even given custody of the underground Communist Party's secret archives, which he had at his home. On at least one occasion, he even performed a delicate mission. He used his car to smuggle out of Modena the fascist mayor, a double agent for the resistance, to secret meetings with partisan leaders. The mayor was under suspicion from the fascist secret police, and Enzo was risking arrest too by facilitating these meetings. On top of all of this, Ferrari had to look after the day-to-day running of his company. He had to adapt its production to the demands of the Ministry of War, meaning that by the end of 1944, most of AAC's output consisted of hydraulic honing machines, which I have to confess I have no idea what these are, nor what their importance was to the war effort, but here we are. The Allies, though, they must have had a bit of a better idea, because they bombed Ferrari's plant twice, in November of 1944 and February of 1945. After the bloody conclusion of World War II, Ferrari had two more reasons to celebrate. First, the birth of his second son, Piero, from his relationship with Lina Lardi. Then, he officially changed the company's name to Ferrari and released the first vehicle under this name, the Ferrari 125S. The 125S was the first of many Ferraris to carry a V12 engine which had two banks of 6 cylinders each, arranged in a V shape at a 60-degree angle. The following 10 years were a decade of success for the company. Ferrari scooped a third position at the 1948 Grand Prix of Italy and then went on to win the 1,000 Miles road race. In October at Lake Garda, Enzo scored his first victory against his old employers, Alfa Romeo. In 1949, the Ferrari team participated in 49 competitions, winning 30 of them. When the first Formula One World Championship took place in Silverstone on May 13, 1950, the Ferrari team was not there. Enzo was biding his time. He wanted to make sure that his Scuderia was ready for victory. A huge victory came in 1951 when Ferrari driver Frielan Gonzalez beat legendary Alfa Romeo pilot Manuel Fangio. This defeat was a tipping point for Alfa, whose leadership decided to abandon racing for good. Regarding the implications of this win, Enzo Ferrari said, "Today, I have killed my mother." With Alfa out of the way, Enzo had free reign. In 1952 and 1953, his Scuderia won the F1 World Championship twice in a row. Naturally, all these victories would fill newspaper headlines, meaning plenty of free advertising for Ferrari's other line of work, his regular cars for private clients. Enzo and his team designed at least 20 different models in the 1950s, mostly in their distinctive flame red. Enzo's eldest son, Dino, a gifted engineer, had been working on an evolution of the V12 engine requiring only 6 cylinders, i.e. the V6 1,500 cubic centimeter. Unfortunately, Dino would not see the new line of cars to fruition. His muscular dystrophy had been degenerating his body for years, and he died on June 30th, 1956, at the age of 24. Enzo Ferrari never recovered from the death of his son. According to friends and co-workers, his personality became ever more introverted, somber, and confrontational, almost dictatorial at work. He started wearing his signature sunglasses, which he never removed in public, as a sign of mourning. Ferrari even decided to never attend another race, and he stopped frequenting theaters, cinemas, and concert halls. Later in life, he made a confession to a biographer. Shortly before Dino's death, father and son had been on a mountain trip. Not bearing the thought of watching him die slowly, Enzo had been one breath away from hugging Dino and jumping to their deaths from a cliff. The only thing that kept him from doing this was his other son, Piero, who was not even 10 years old at the time. Following Dino's death, Enzo only had a few peaceful years to mourn before the start of the worst decade for the company, and that was the 1960s. 1961 was the year that risked ending it all, the year of the Great Ferrari Walkout. It all started with Enzo's wife Laura and her increased involvement in company affairs. This meddling did not sit well with sales manager Girolamo Gardini, who threatened to leave if Laura wasn't removed from company affairs. Guess what happened next? Well, Gardini was fired. But the sales manager was not the only executive with a grudge against Mrs. Ferrari. 8 more key employees had Gardini's back. When their friend was dismissed, the 8 executives staged a mass walkout, leaving Ferrari without some of his best people and with upcoming sports car projects in limbo. Some of the engineers even went to create a rival company, ATS, which still produces high-end supercars to this very day. Racing-wise, Ferrari had a good year though. He secured both the World Championship of Drivers and the International Cup for F1 Manufacturers title in 1961. But the glory from trophies could not hide the tragic trend of accidents involving Ferrari drivers. In 1957, drivers Castellotti and Portago had fatal crashes in 2 separate races, both of which resulted in audience injuries too. In 1958, it was drivers Musso and Collins who died 2 weeks apart. All these accidents led to the worst tragedy by far, Wolfgang von Tripp's accident at the Monza track on September 10th, 1961, a crash which claimed the lives of the driver and 14 spectators. It got so bad that even the Vatican was involved. Inside the pages of its official newspapers, the Holy See compared Enzo Ferrari to Kronos of Greek mythology, the titan who devoured his own children. Sometime in 1963, Enzo had a spat with one of his clients, a local producer of boilers and tractors. The client had struck it rich with his machinery and had treated himself to a Ferrari 250 GT. He didn't just cruise around on weekends though, he raced full speed at the Cannonball, an underground championship of amateur drivers. The tractor man had noticed that the GT's clutch would give way too often, and so he frequently went to Maranello to have it fixed or replaced at the source. On one occasion, he met Enzo himself, and he dared to give him some advice on how to improve his clutches. Ferrari's reply was predictable. "What do you know about cars? Go back to your tractors." The cannibal driver, he took it as a challenge. He went back to his workshop and gathered a team of leading engineers and designers. Some of them were Ferrari veterans. Along the way, they realized that Ferrari used the same basic clutch components as their tractors, only they charged them 10 times as much as existing clients. It was a revelation which only steered their determination. Sports cars had a higher profit margin than tractors, and one single sale would generate way more continuous income through sales of overpriced parts. In November, their first model was presented at a car event in Turin, the 350 GT. The tractor guy, he was called Ferruccio Lamborghini, and Ferrari had just created a fierce and worthy competitor, chipping away at the niche market of luxury sports cars. One of the sporting events Scuderia Ferrari had been dominating was the 24 Hours of Le Mans. This is a test of endurance and car reliability more than speed. After Ferrari won the 1962 Le Mans, a worldwide press celebrated the event. More and more free advertising coverage for the team at Maranello. Apparently this angered Henry Ford II. He, alongside many other American car giants, was prevented from racing by a self-imposed motorsport ban. In an interview, Ford blurted out that he spent billions in ads for his cars, but that mechanic ended up on newspapers all across the world for free. The mechanic retorted, "If Mr. Ford wants to be on the papers for free, all he has to do is buy a Ferrari." This was the initial salvo to an epic rivalry. Ford was intrigued by the chance to use motor racing as a means to promote car sales, so to circumvent the motorsport ban on American cars, he extended an offer to buy Ferrari. The Maranello company had been struggling lately due to the high costs involved in maintaining the racing team and the increasing number of competitors. So Enzo considered Henry's offer to acquire Ferrari. He had one condition: he would remain at the helm of the racing team with no intervention whatsoever from Ford's executives. When Enzo realized he may not obtain that, he abruptly put an end to all negotiations. Ford was now bent on revenge. His mission became to defeat Ferrari on the track. Tossing the motorsport ban aside, he invested a sum that was 10 times what it offered to Enzo just to build his own racing team. He hired driving royalty like Carroll Shelby, Bruce McLaren, Chris Amon, and Ken Miles. Next, he had his engineers develop from scratch a car to beat the Ferraris at Le Mans, the GT40. The first duel took place at Le Mans in 1964, and it was a defeat for the Americans. The following year, the Italians came out on top again. Henry Ford wanted that victory at any cost. He bankrolled an unlimited budget to his racing director, Carroll Shelby, who went for quantity as well as quality, fielding 13 GT40s at the race. 4 of them had to withdraw, but eventually the strategy worked out. 3 of the GT40s cut the finishing line, one after the other. Ferrari found a revenge of sorts the following year when 3 of his cars achieved a similar feat at the Daytona race, but it was Le Mans that really counted. In 1967, the two car giants faced each other again, and again Ford won. Since that defeat, a Ferrari has never won at Le Mans again. Enzo surely did not despair too much, as his cars kept on racking up trophies at Formula One Grand Prix. But he still had to sort out some new alliance that could keep his company afloat. Enter the Italian car giant Fiat. The Turin Corporation put forward a Godfather-style offer that Enzo could not refuse. Fiat pumped 2 billion liras in cash into Ferrari, demanding in exchange 50% of all shares, as well as the designs for Ferrari's engines. Fiat would also use their extensive plants to mass-produce the road cars on which they could earn a revenue. But the most important clause was the one that recognized Enzo's full autonomy in managing the racing team. You see, racing was what always mattered to him. Everything else was just sort of collateral. Ferrari gradually relinquished control over his company, leaving to Fiat up to 90% of the overall shares. This allowed him to concentrate on scoring victory after victory in Formula One. All in all, it has been estimated that Scuderia Ferrari, in both its pre- and post-war incarnations, collected 5,000 victories worldwide. As Enzo entered his 8th decade on Earth, he was forced to reduce his overall activity, but he also enjoyed some well-deserved rewards. In 1970, he received the Gold Medal for Culture and the Arts by the President of the Republic in recognition for his contribution to Italian sports and economy. This was followed by another presidential honorific, that of Knight of the Grand Cross of the Italian Republic. On February the 27th, 1978, his wife Laura died of natural causes. It was only at this point that he could formally recognize his illegitimate son, Piero. Piero could take on the Ferrari surname, and he was given a seat on the Ferrari board of directors, progressively replacing his father in the company's work and in his social engagements. In 1987, Ferrari unveiled the last car to ever be produced under Enzo's supervision, the iconic F40. This is probably one that you had as a Hot Wheels toy. Ferrari was now 89 years of age and had been suffering from kidney disease for a long time. It was a very ill Enzo that walked into Modena's university to collect an honorary degree in physics. A few months later, on August 14, 1988, Enzo Ferrari quietly passed away. By his own wish, his funeral was a very small ceremony that was open to only a small number of family members and old friends. So now the question becomes, do I really need to talk about Enzo Ferrari's legacy? Given the impact of his company, the incredibly high standards of his cars, and the victories of Scuderia Ferrari, the Italian titan obviously led a successful, influential life. Ferrari has been celebrated in books, films, and television. Either through encouragement or outright rivalry, Enzo has inspired a generation of engineers and manufacturers to push the boundaries on what a car should look and drive like. We'll end with an anecdote that reveals Enzo Ferrari's enduring appeal. In March 2017, Italian military police busted a big drug trafficking gang in a massive operation that spanned 5 regions. One of the 34 arrested felons confessed to one of their master plans to raise cash for the gang: the kidnapping of Enzo Ferrari's body from Modena's cemetery. The gang had already figured out an escape route and where to hide the body. Their plan was to demand a ransom of millions of euros from a relative, presumably Piero. Luckily, they were stopped on time, but this crazy plan shows just how large he loomed during his lifetime, so big that his corporeal body may never find peace. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this several times per week, and hit that notification bell so you find out when we put out brand new videos. Also, please do check out our fantastic sponsor, Squarespace. They're linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.